Let me ask you something. Have you ever thought about disruptive innovation and what it means for your industry, or even for you personally? It's this huge force that can feel like a major threat. But today, we're going to flip that script. We're going to break down how you can see it as a massive, massive opportunity. And to get there, we're not starting in Silicon Valley. No, we have to go way back, all the way to ancient Rome.
Okay, so to really get a handle on our modern relationship with disruption, I want you to picture this. It's the 1st century in Rome. The emperor is Tiberius.
So a glassmaker, a real innovator, shows up at the emperor's court with this unbelievable creation, flexible glass. He takes this drinking vessel made of the stuff and just throws it on the floor. And you know what? It doesn't shatter. It just dents. And then he pulls out a hammer and just taps it right back into shape. Incredible, right?
Now, you'd think the emperor would be absolutely thrilled, but he wasn't. See, back then, all the best, most valuable drinking vessels were made of gold and silver. Tiberius saw this flexible glass, and he didn't see progress. He saw a threat. He knew instantly that this invention would completely wreck the Roman economy. If this stuff got out, the value of precious metals would just plummet.
So the emperor looks this proud inventor right in the eye and asks him a really simple, kind of chilling question. Does anyone else know how to make this? And the inventor, he's beaming with pride. He swears an oath that nope, he's the only one. He alone holds the secret.
And for that, the emperor had the man beheaded. Just like that. The innovation was killed, and the threat was gone.
That story, wow, it just perfectly captures the kind of fear that true disruption can spark. A fear so deep it would drive an emperor to murder just to stop it. But here's the huge difference between then and now. Today, you can't just behead an idea.
So what do we even mean when we say disruption? Well, the term was made famous by Clayton Christensen, and he drew a really important line in the sand.
Here's the core of Christensen's whole idea. Not all innovation is created equal. There's a world of difference between just making something a little bit better and creating something that changes the entire game. And this gets us to the 2 basic types. On one hand, you have sustaining technology. Think about improving a car's gas mileage. You're just making a good product better for the people who already buy it. But then you have disruptive technology. That's like the first electric car. It doesn't just improve the old system, it creates a brand new one that makes the old way of doing things totally obsolete. And you see this pattern play out over and over again. For like 100 years, the music business was all about selling albums. Then, bam, Napster and iTunes came along and just blew that whole model apart by creating a market for single songs. Or what about the typewriter? It was the king of the office for a century, until the personal computer showed up and basically turned it into a museum piece overnight. Now, this isn't just some interesting history lesson. The real kicker here is that the pace of this change, it's getting faster. A lot faster. Like exponentially faster. Remember the movie Back to the Future? It was made in 1985, and they went back 30 years to 1955. And yeah, things were different, TVs were new, soda was cheaper, but the world was still pretty recognizable. Now think about the 30-year jump from 1985 to 2018. That leap is it's astronomically bigger. We went from a world with no internet, no cell phones, to a world that's completely defined by them. The sheer amount of change is staggering. There's this great concept for this feeling. It's called the period of shock unit, or PSU. Think about this. It took the telephone 75 years to get to 50 million users. The internet did it in 4. 4 years! That acceleration is the PSU in action. It's the shock you'd feel if you brought somebody from just 30 years ago to today and showed them your smartphone. And the intensity of that shock, it's getting bigger every single year. Okay, so all this talk about things speeding up can sound pretty intimidating, maybe even terrifying, but this is where we pivot. Because for every single threat the disruption creates, it unleashes an even greater opportunity.
This is probably the most important thing to get from our entire conversation. When an old industry gets disrupted, the value that was all locked up in that old system, it doesn't just vanish, it gets released. And all that released value, all that economic energy, it has to go somewhere. It shows up as new ways people behave, new supply chains, and tons of new data that we never had access to before.
And the scale of that opportunity right now is it's unprecedented. 100 years ago, just reaching a few thousand customers was a huge deal. Right now, thanks to technology, you've got over 6 billion potential customers just a click away. The chance to grab that released value, to build new services, or to monetize all that new data, it has literally never been greater.
So, that brings us to the final and most important question. How do you get on the right side of this whole thing? How do you become the disruptor instead of the one being disrupted? And here's the secret, and it's a big one. You don't actually have to be the one who invents the next flexible glass. To be a disruptor in today's world, you don't have to invent anything new at all. You just have to be smart enough to capture the value that gets released when someone else's breakthrough happens. The process is actually pretty simple. Think of it like this. First, a disruption happens. Let's say email disrupts postal mail. Second, value is released from that old system. We're talking billions of dollars in postage and infrastructure. And third, new businesses pop up to capture all that new value. Think about every company that's been built on email marketing or sales. They didn't invent email. They just figured out how to use it to build something new and create wealth.
So really, being a modern disruptor, it's a mindset. These are people who are always looking around the corner, ready to take advantage of new opportunities. They refuse to be scared of technology. They see it as a tool, not a threat. They're totally willing to reinvent themselves again and again because they know what worked yesterday is not going to work tomorrow. And most of all, they are laser-focused on that one goal, capturing the value that disruption sets free.
Ultimately, it just comes down to being willing to try. This quote really nails it. Trying something and finding out it doesn't work, that's not failing. That's called learning. The real failure is being so afraid that you don't even try in the first place.
So let's be crystal clear. Disruption is coming for every single industry. It's not a question of if, it's just a question of when. And that leaves every one of us with a really simple choice. You can either embrace the journey of the disruptor, always learning and adapting to grab those new opportunities, or you can become a victim of it. So which one will you choose?